Hello, and welcome to the 6th episode of the Mobility Talks, the online series launched by EIT Urban Mobility, where all aspects of urban mobility are considered and discussed in depth. I'm John Paul Judson, and I have the pleasure of moderating these mobility talks, in particular because there is always something in my mobility life that happens as a consequence of these talks. In the previous episode, we spoke about MaaS, Mobility as a Service, and how it is reshaping the user experience and access to mobility services. The day after our talks, the city of Brussels, where I live, launched its own test application. So once again, I'm curious to see what happens to me after this episode, entitled Citizens as Drivers of Their Own Mobility, where we go beyond the user experience and we look at the city as a democratic space where citizens are not just on the receiving end of a convenient service that gets them from A to B, but where they are directly involved in the design, planning, and implementation of mobility solutions. While this may sound appealing, it is not always carried out in practice, and this event will be raising lots of questions around the concept, the process, and the outlook for citizen engagement in the future. So I am delighted to be joined by 4 speakers who each represent a different perspective on the issue. Robert Brown, Senior Researcher, Institute for Advanced Studies, Vienna. He's doing research on involving and engaging stakeholders in creating more democratic research and innovation processes, and he specializes in participatory practices on mobility. Robert, a pleasure to have you here. Evelyne Marlier, Project Manager at the European Passengers Federation. She focuses on user experience and it involves end users to create, evaluate mobility products and services. Her personal motto is get people moving. So I hope we'll be successful in doing that today. Evelyne, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Frank Hansen, who has been working with the BMW Group since 2004 and is now in the Department for Sustainability and Mobility within the Group's Strategy Division, which integrates the BMW Center of Competence for Urban Mobility, which he co-founded in 2015. Frank, pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And Dr. Burcu Özdemir, she is Smart City Director at the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, and she will be giving us the perspective of what it means to engage with citizens for a large city. Burcu, thanks for being with us too.
Thank you, Paul.
So to kick off this session, I will ask each panelist to give us a short 5-minute introduction, and then we'll have around 1 hour of open debate where I hope that you will be actively involved through the Slido tool that we have made available to the right of your screen. You can submit your questions there and answer the polls, and there is already one live poll up and running that I can see that you're many answering to know more about your expectation for today's episode. And we see that it's about learning more about citizen engagement, hearing about case studies and best practices. So I hope that we'll be able to deliver on those promises. I will be calling upon Bernadette Bergsma from the EIT Urban Mobility team. She's the one watching over Slido, and she'll be integrating also your questions into our debate. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over the floor to Robert to give us his perspective on citizen engagement for urban mobility. Robert, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jean-Paul. It's obviously a pleasure to be here. And I'm looking forward to sharing my ideas and also listening to others. So let's get started. As an introduction, Jean-Paul asked us to talk about failed innovations in mobility. And I was, thinking hard. But failure and success as binaries are not exactly the way I see things. When we talk about technology, I would much rather think in terms of ontopolitical fit. And I know it's very complicated, I'm a philosopher, but I can translate it for you. This is the philosophical language asking the question, does it assist to live the life we want to live? And me being a researcher in automobility, or colloquially speaking, the car, no offense meant, Frank, and obviously this is something we can talk about later. I want to, show you some pictures, and these pictures you are, knowledgeable of the before and after pictures. The before, which is, you know, the street full of cars, and then the after picture with a beautiful setup of multimodal modes of transportation and a very little space for cars. And you would think that this problem is new, but it's not new. This is the problem that cars have been creating the first day they appeared on our streets. And the streets are how they were. Children were running around, and then cars took over. So the city is more than a place in space, but it is a drama. And I don't know how Jean-Paul will experience life and the drama after our session, but I just come from another session where a researcher in mobility actually said that understanding doing public engagement opened a totally new world for him. I don't know if that world will open for Jean-Paul, but this is what we're trying to actually achieve. And in the left, you see how a street looked like in the 20s when people were actually beginning to see cars on the street. And what we don't want is the type of public engagement that you see on in the right-hand lower corner, the first actual blockade against cars. And so cars not only entered our mobility practices, but they actually entered our political practices, and they entered us into our vocabularies. I don't know if you knew, but the word jaywalker was created by automobility, and there was a poll asking for a no vote of prohibiting cars on our streets. So what I want to suggest is another translation of what public engagement means. And for me, public engagement, again, philosophical language, is a form of public epistemology. Public epistemology meaning creating knowledge together. And this is something that exists, and it's called commoning. We should do public engagement not by asking people, but by attending together to our commons. And our space, our life, our well-being, therefore our mobility, are all commons. So basically public engagement, I call commoning mobility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Indeed, we shouldn't wait until we get to the blockade situation before we engage citizens or have citizens engaged. Thanks very much for that first introduction. Now we'll go straight into the user perspective with Evelyn. Over to you. Evelyn, are you with us still?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah,
Sorry.
perfect.
Yes, I was just saying that I'm really glad that I can represent the users here today. I'm trying to change the slides, but there's nothing moving right now.
If you click on the
I took control. Yeah. But it's not moving.
Okay.
Maybe
we can assist you.
Yes, I can do it. Yeah, like this. Now it's working. Sorry for the. So indeed, we were asked to give a couple of examples of what citizen engagement can mean in practice. And I will start with showing some images, because images sometimes say more than words. I think desire lines, or a beautiful word in Dutch for the Dutch participants here, olifantenpaadjes, are a beautiful example of how the design of public spaces isn't always fitted to what the user wants. I think this is you can see it here, even though it might, sometimes public spaces are really designed by the best architects or engineers. It's not always what users want. Then next, I mean, this is obvious, also not a good example. I think this image explains itself. And yeah, I think we all know that public transport also suffered a lot of accessibility problems. I also had the experience when I walked around in the city with a pram. Then sometimes I couldn't enter the old trams just because the doors were too narrow. And so it limits your mobility. And for some people, it really they face transport poverty because design of public transport isn't fitted to their needs and isn't inclusive to all. So this is also something that we should, that can be improved in the future. Another example, some mobility apps fail, or they have just a limited success or a limited amount of users. The same counts, for example, for a lot of mass applications, because, well, they don't take into account the bigger picture and the real user needs, or sometimes they aren't integrating everything, and so the user isn't shielded from the fragmentation that lays behind. So they don't offer a lot of added value to the private car or current solutions. So that's also something, if you engage people and involve them from the very beginning, then you can really design the products better to their needs, and market uptake can be increased. I like to share this quote from Jane Jacobs with you. If you have never heard about her, please look her up. She was an urban visionary and actually one of the forerunners of citizen engagement. There's no logic that can be superimposed on the city. People make it, and it's to them that we must fit our plans. And just want to conclude with this. So indeed, it is my job to find out what citizens really need, but I'd really like to ask all of you, if you're a policymaker, if you're part of an NGO, if you work for an NGO, or if you are working for a startup, actually, it should be everyone's job to find out what passengers want or what citizens want, because in the end, we're all passengers and we all want what is best for us. And I think we all deserve it. And well, on the other hand, if you take into account the real needs of the peoples, then the chances for success are enhanced, and or you can have an increased level of support for your political decision, and you can have an increased feeling of belonging. So I really like, after today's webinar, that everyone is enthusiastic to more apply and implement citizen engagement methods.
Okay, thank you, Eveline. So let's move straight then to BMW. Frank, how excited are you to engage with citizens from your perspective?
I think we're dealing with mobility demand, since we started the company back then more than 100 years ago. But I think citizen engagement is something like the ultimate form or perspective on the demand side of mobility. And I want to bring some insights into a project which we started back in 2016 in Berlin. It's called Neue Mobilität Berlin. This is German, but I think it's quite easy to understand. It means New Mobility Berlin. It is a collaborative project between the municipality of Berlin, Charlottenburg-Wilmersdorf, a local residential initiative, the Technical University of Berlin, and the Berlin Agency for Electromobility. And we are focusing on a very urgent pain point that we see in many growing and densifying cities, especially in Europe, namely the scarcity of public space. And Robert mentioned it before, and Eveline too. This is a problem that comes lies in the way we use our public road space. As you see, there are many cars parked in the cities of Berlin. Those are recent snapshots which I did. And this is a problem which we are addressing with the project Neue Mobilität Berlin in a very specific way, and where we started the engagement process. But first of all, we did a survey together with the KIT, the University of Karlsruhe. The survey that aimed to cluster car owners by their car dependency. So we have 4 clusters clustered by the objective car dependency, which is basically the mobility behavior, and the subjective car dependency, which is based on psychological factors. And I want you to focus on the car-independent pragmatics at the bottom left. So the car-independent pragmatics are car owners in cities that actually have a car, but they don't need it in their day-to-day mobility patterns, and they actually don't want it. They don't like to drive. They have very specific use cases for which they have the car, but most of the time it's parked. So this is 1/3, and this is a merged sample for Berlin, San Francisco, and Shanghai, which is very remarkable, I think. So the distribution of the car owners into those 4 types is quite similar in those cities. And we did this recently in Munich, and it's quite the same result. So we have 1/3 low-hanging fruits of car owners that could quite easily switch to a multimodal mobility pattern without car ownership. But the problem is they don't know it. And I've been a mobility research for a very long time, and mobility behavior is very much based on routines and learned behavior. And this is why we started an engagement process in the first step with car owners. So we asked them why they still own a car, and we focused on those car-independent pragmatics. And those are some snapshots of our workshops we did in Berlin. And the result was a campaign which we are running right now in Berlin. We have done this in 2018, 2019 too. So this is the 3rd run. And the basic concept is you swap your car for an incentive package of multimodal mobility services like public transportation, car sharing, bike sharing, e-scooter sharing, and so on. And you just try it out. So you experience a month without your private car. And they have been, there's a survey before and after by the TU Berlin. And they tell us what they experienced. And last year we had actually 1/3 of the participants that got rid of their car directly after the campaign. So the goal for this campaign is to break up the routines and make car owners get rid of the car and switch to multimodal patterns. But from my perspective, this is just an enabler. With urban mobility, and especially sustainable urban mobility, is an enabler for more livable spaces within densely populated urban areas. And this is why we wanted to engage with all the participants, the residents, not just the car owners, and enable them to experience transformation. So we transformed many spaces within Berlin on a very temporary level, so for 2 or 3 weeks. And we made them sit in the driver's seat of transformation themselves. So they told us what they wanted to do and still want to do with the freed up urban space, because cars are vanishing from public road space. And this is what happened. So we had parklets, we had urban gardening and such kind of things, and the residents themselves took action. So this is it for some impressions of our project Neue Mobilität Berlin, where we highly engage with local residents. and learn a lot.
Okay, thanks very much, Frank. Indeed, I mean, urban gardening seems to take you far away from what we would usually associate BMW with, but it's very interesting to hear that this project is ongoing. And now we travel to Istanbul, and we hear from Burcu. Over to you.
Hi again. Okay. Actually, I'm so pleasure to be here with this great team. Thank you again for this chance. First of all, citizen engagement is so important for us, not only mobility, also every functional area related governing city. And my department main purpose is the increasing citizen engagement, and we being a smart city based on the hearing the citizen in a correct way. And yeah. As IMM, Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, we continue to work to implement the smart city concept since 2017. As a director, we search smart city strategies, applicants, architecture, legislation from around the world, and also we determined and monitoring all kinds of indicators and indexes within the scope of 9 functional areas for our smart city director, such as mobility, human governance. Mostly play the role of activator director for the project related with these 9 functional areas and work with related units in Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. But I would like to say that we value participatory democracy, and our slogan is "We will succeed together." It refers to all our stakeholders participate in government and civic life. So our department, we began a series of workshops, brings together successful entrepreneurs, users, inventors, students, citizens, to help both online and line. One of them is to dedicate to major urban issues facing Istanbul and to solve altogether these urban problems. Zemin is the technological and innovation center. We are coming together with the citizens in that place. And as an online platform, we create Tech Istanbul, and we came together to all citizens in this digital platform. We also manage, develop, and maintaining Istanbul Metropolitan Big Data and Open Data platform, which includes the units and subsidiary as well. Open Data platform is so valuable for us to create a citizen engagement more valuable. Actually, we inspire to create an ecosystem for urban innovation and thus choose to make our data set available to everyone who interested in improving quality city life. And Open Data also Zemin Istanbul and Tech Istanbul is part of this ecosystem for urban innovation. And as you know, Istanbul, I would like to talk about a little bit with numbers about Istanbul and Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. Istanbul is the biggest metropolis in Turkey with the population over 16 million. It means that larger than 23 European countries. And near to 5 million of this population is young people. And also 60 million people are internet users in Turkey. And 40 million of them from Istanbul. And also Istanbul is a global city, and managing Istanbul huge importance because of organization of Istanbul is like managing a little city. When we talk about our municipal enterprises, their number is 32 subsidiary public utility corporation, and also more than 60,000 employees and near to 6,000 kilometers square service area. And also Istanbul a little bit different than the other cities. It's the most important city in Turkey in terms of geographical location, history, natural, and cultural richness. when you think about the population density, also it's totally different than managing this city, the other European cities. Actually, local government units are municipalities, special provincial administration, and villages. Today, Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality consists of 39 districts, and each district has own municipality, while 23 districts are located European side and 40 districts and Anatolian side. Mayor of Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality managing the whole city. It means that engagement process for us starting from the local municipality to starting from the citizen to local municipality, then metropolitan municipality for us. Because of this, we create a digital platform, Istanbul Yours, to provide citizen engagement for inclusive deliberation, consensus, and collective wisdom, which has been found to lead to better decision making while managing Istanbul city. Thank you.
Thank you, Burcu. Yeah, you introduced the complexities of governance into this discussion, so I hope that we'll be able to tackle that throughout the course of this debate. So thank you for these introductory statements. We can now open up the discussion. I'd like to kick it off with a question to the audience, an open question. Why do you think it is important to involve citizens in urban mobility planning or not, and designing urban mobility solutions? And that's the question I'd like to throw at Robert straight away. I guess in your research you must be meeting sometimes some resistance to your ideas, possibly. How do you respond to that? What are the key arguments as to why it's so important?
I didn't get the word sometimes. It's rather always. I think we are living both in a techno-optimistic world and also in an expert-based hierarchical setup where knowledge is created by experts. And actually, not only experts think this way, but the people out there also. So strangely enough, with citizen engagement, you get mostly no friends, because the experts are not your friend, because you want to, tell them that you're not good enough, you have to get on board some others. But also the people who you think are your friends, the people at large, they're also skeptical, because who am I? Who am I to tell? It's, the experts know, the engineers design, etc. So it's not easy. When you do citizen engagement, the interesting thing is that you right away face things that you never considered before. And there were two words that are important, both in Frank's and Burcu's introduction. One, Frank has mentioned that there is a scarcity of public space. There is no scarcity. Public space is public space. The problem is that some of it is already privatized. And therefore, words matter. And this is the expert's view. I'm sorry, Frank, I don't want to pick on you. But there is no scarcity from a citizen's point of view. It's open space. And the other word that I want to kind of question a little bit is smart in the smart city. I would like to see smart people as opposed to smart cities. Smart city, which is basically a datafied city, is not a smart city. A smart city is a city in which people flourish, and people flourish when they're all considered to be smart. And public engagement for me is maybe this slogan: everybody is smart, just in a different way. And if we want to create new knowledge, then we have to invite all that smartness to the table.
Okay, Frank, maybe a reaction and then also a question as to how difficult is it to also maybe convince people inside BMW that the kind of work that you're doing is useful in the broader sense.
Yeah, Robert, you're right. But the thing is, public space is given, and we don't want even more streets. And more road infrastructure within the cities. So we have to deal with a given space and just use it better or more efficient. And I think the potential literally you find on the streets. And the solution is to leverage the potentials you already see on the demand side. And we know that there are so many cars out there that are parked for days or weeks or even months. And this is why we kicked off our own car sharing scheme back in 2011, which was meant to serve those car owners or address those car owners that from time to time need a car and still possess one. But the thing, what is completely different, if you compare it to bringing out a new battery electric vehicle that you can buy, with car sharing is you have to change your mobility pattern. And as I mentioned already, mobility patterns are very much based on routines. You have learned this, and we have to break them up. And this is nothing new for us at the BMW Group. We are very convinced that we can solve those urban pain points with new mobility offers like MaaS or whatever. And we have to bring ourselves something to the party. And we want to engage in this transformation process. But because we are convinced that there's a very huge potential from the demand side.
Okay, so there is corporate support for the kind of work that you're doing, even if it goes way beyond the actual product or service that you're selling.
It doesn't go beyond, I think. The new thing is that we bring offers that can solve those urban pain points in another way, just not battery electric vehicles. We have this transformation process going on, but to reach new target groups, to convince them to get rid of the car. This seems new, but for us, it's not very new. So we launched car sharing back in 2011.
Okay.
And yes, we have the backing. I'm part of the corporate strategy department, so I'm directly reporting to Mr. Zipse.
Okay, interesting. Evelyn, do you meet a lot of resistance, and how do you counter that?
Well, I agree partly with Robert that you don't make friends, but I must say that it's not always the case, luckily. I just gonna give an example. At the moment, I'm working together on a project. It's called Traffic Management as a Service with TomTom and B-Mobile. And we are together with a university responsible for user research. And actually, in the beginning, they were a little resistant that, yeah, we just want to start building things, and now we need to wait for the research results, etc. But then actually, when they saw what we found out, it was really, we didn't think about it that way. So they also learned how to make, at the end, they saw and they learned that it was really useful for them, because now their services are a little bit adapted more and inclusive. They made it more inclusive, and they added new functionalities, so they can also attract, and it's more appealing for different target groups. So in that respect, it's also a win situation for them. I think also now for policymakers, they are more and more aware that it can also have and entail benefits for them to reach out to users, because then a political decision can be more supported in the end if people are involved from the beginning. That's a really important element, that not to give people a fake feeling of involvement if they are just asked at the final point when all the decisions are almost made, like, hey, what do you think about it? But we won't really take into account your inputs, because we're already in the final stage. No, you should really start from the beginning. I think more and more that's a good evolution. More and more people are aware in all different sectors that that citizen engagement and actually a bit broader stakeholder involvement can entail a lot of advantages for them.
And
also, like the example Frank gave, indeed, it can, because of reaching out to your customers, you really know what they want, and it can also make you aware that you need to shift your business model from time to time. If you only stick now to the car user, you showed in the beginning in your presentation, Frank, the division of the people who really want to hold on to their car, then you see, well, actually, it's not a majority anymore. So if BMW also wants to reach out to these other customers, then they also need to revise their maybe original or traditional point of sale. And I think it's a really good evolution. Yeah.
And you're also introducing these two notions. On the one hand, there are businesses, there are also public authorities, policymakers that need to do the job of engaging with citizens. When you're in Istanbul with 16 million citizens and all these different layers of complexity, do you find it difficult to sell the notion that yes, we need to do this all together?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I'm totally agree with Eleven mentioned that the people want to see the governance they are hearing them, and then they are giving the value what they saying. Because of we create a digital platform, we are hearing them, showing them, taking action all together. Actually, when we think about urban mobility problem, when you talk about 60 million people, two sides, European side and Asia side, and it's really hard to deal with the traffic. We have a traffic jam, and after the COVID, it's getting higher than higher because of the second-hand car is selling a lot, and I mean people generally preferring to taking their private car. And that moment, if we are going to change something in mobility, first we need to change the travel behavior, travel habits of the citizen. What we need first, we need to done a little bit sharing the problem, trying to find a solution altogether, and also create awareness about the mobility, especially for Istanbul, because first things for mobility, for human behavior is the comfort. They are preferring comfort if they are, I mean, has a good economical situation. Yeah, and but it is really hard, I mean, involving the 16 million people at the same time.
I imagine very different people within those 16 million. As you said, the two cultures already, East and West.
Yeah, East and West. And I mean, yeah, it's also the way of travel in here. We have ferry, metro bus. I mean, all kind of hubs we have in here. And I mean, our population is not homogeneous, and yeah, but we, as much as possible, we try to involve them, and then we find the way, create a digital platform, Istanbul yours, and just share idea. With this, not the government hearing the citizen, also citizen hearing another citizen. I'm going to give some example near to other debate subject. Okay.
Okay. Robert, you wanna step in here? Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
I think the discussion is turning into a very relevant direction about stakeholder engagement. And, you know, I come from a tradition, a theoretical tradition that's called SDS, which is Science and Technology Studies. And the big question is whether we take it that we're living in technology or with technology. And the decision we make is the decision, what kind of public engagement are we talking about? If you consider, and this is the direction the others are taking the discussion, is that we're living with technology. So it's a policy related issue. We have to talk about demand. We have to ask people how they can better live with technology. In my understanding, and this is kind of, and I was told by Jean-Paul that I can be radical today, so I will, we're living in technology. And living in technology, public engagement means that we invite the people to participate in the technology design. What kind of technologies do we want to live in? A car is not a given. Actually, BMW, which was founded in 1916, was not founded as a car company. They actually sold their first car in 1928 because there was a business interest. So cars are not only so there can be different types of mobility devices in our cities, and the question is then, do we really engage people in designing what kind of life they are living in technology? And this is the radical idea I want to propose. And when we're talking about smart cities, again, who is smart? If the person is smart, then we're trying to be at least cautious of whether we want to give over decisions to artificial intelligence and dataification. So I think this is kind of the heuristic approach that I want to suggest for you today.
Okay, thank you. Eveline, you want to jump in there? And unmute yourself, please.
Yes, sorry, Robert. I again do not completely agree with you. I think we are not living in technology. I would prefer to define it as technology should be a mean, not a goal in itself, and it can be a good tool to help us to reach our goals. And indeed, what we see now that a lot of new mobility services and new mobility tools are still too much technology driven. There's a big tech push, and they sometimes still believe that if we build it, people will use it. And that's just not always the case. And indeed, it can really, if you really don't take the tech as a starting point, but really as a means, and you take the users and your customers as a starting point, then it's really easier to merge these two. And then you will, in my opinion, you will be really better to create improved mobility services.
But maybe just to stay on this one, Eveline, and stay with me. I see here one of the responses to the question. You know, why do you think it's important to involve citizens? I quite like it because they say, you know, what if citizens engage for keeping cars and parking spaces, and especially possibly those who don't live in center of town? And I just wonder, when we talk about citizen engagement, aren't we sometimes a little bit too naive in thinking that citizens are necessarily agents of change and transformation, whereas probably at least as many, if not more, agents of the status quo, I would well imagine. So how would you respond to that?
But well, yeah, it's true. I mean, I also was involved in a couple of projects and where we tried to reallocate public space, reallocate parkings, and we invited the neighbors and the people of the street who were living there, and they were really not so keen of this change, and they wanted their own parking spot because people, well, they are really used to it. It's like Frank said, people don't like to break habits, routines, so it's really requires from them a mentality switch, and it's not easy to create. But you can still, even though you can face a lot of resistance, the only way to really work around it is like to really okay, but how would you then solve it? And if you like think about, imagine what we could do. And if we don't use this park, or we use this parking space indeed to have a small soccer thing, or a small spot to meet with other people, so you give them the voice, or how they would reallocate this place, and then the chance that they will agree, and in the end, is a lot bigger. I will not say that it will always work out, but the chance of success will definitely increase. And also then, just because people hear each other's opinion, so you have this strong always in a group, in a heterogeneous group. You have people who are really in favor of private car use, and you have others who don't, who think it's really more important that children can go safely with a bicycle to the school, or that people can access the they just feel safe in the streets, so there's less noise, less pollution, so people hear each other's meaning, and just by so they can hear each other's meaning, they are more willing to change their opinion a bit. So that's also another benefit.
Okay, Frank, I'm sure you have a lot to say on this question of citizens as agents of change or agents of the status quo. Please, if you could unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure.
It would be better to hear you.
Maybe I say something different now. No, I repeat. The first step we wanted to take with the project Neue Mobilität Berlin is to show the correlation between sustainable urban mobility and livability in the city, and that we have many path dependencies and chicken and egg problems. And we faced so much resistance when we took away 2 parking spaces in one road to dedicate them for car sharing, to address this chicken and egg problem of availability of car sharing in this neighborhood. But the thing was, for 2 car sharing spaces, we got rid of 50 cars for 1 month. This was a temporary campaign. Like I showed you on the slides. So when we put a poster on those 2 parking spaces, the car sharing spaces, usually we would have 50 cars here instead, somewhere parked in the neighborhood, and they vanished because of 2 car sharing spaces. Then there was something happening in the heads of the residents, and they got to know the close correlation between the mobility, local mobility patterns, and the livability and the potentials you have if you just switch something that bring residents to move into another mobility pattern, and you could free up so much urban space, and even the hardcore car owners would benefit because they have less parking surge traffic, because the capacities are used more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I would like to bring in Bernadette, actually, who's moderating the Slido. Bernadette, if you would like to join me, could you tell us if there are any questions being raised in the Slido?
Yes, of course. Hi, everybody. There are many questions actually coming in. Let's see. Well, there's an interesting question here coming from Birgul from Istanbul. What are the main distinctions between cities with the highest citizen awareness and the lowest about urban mobility? So there's apparently, well, obviously there's a different quality of implementing sustainable urban mobility solutions, and how the cities actually involve citizens here.
Okay, so is there a correlation between citizen engagement in mobility solutions and the quality of the service provided? Who can go for that one? Maybe Robert, you have some knowledge of some use cases there?
Well, the city I live in, it's called Vienna. Vienna is leading every livability statistics or measurement, and one of the reasons is that there is an extremely strong citizen engagement in creating mobility in the city. Also, not only citizen engagement, but public transportation. Let me give you an example. In Vienna, there are 800,000 yearly ticket buyers of the local public transport company in a city of 1.6 million, because it's a statement to have that. I have that, all my colleagues have that. So I think this is the mentality change that we are talking, or Evelyn and Frank has been talking about. I think this is public engagement. To talk about public engagement is like talking about the paradigm change between Newtonian physics and Einsteinian physics. And I would reframe what Frank said about routines, because it's extremely hard for people to imagine what they cannot imagine. And obviously, everybody can imagine gravity. An apple falls from the tree. That's Newtonian physics. Nobody can imagine time-space distortion. That's Einsteinian physics. We know that we live in an Einsteinian universe, but we cannot imagine Einstein's universe. We can only imagine Newton's universe. So that's why I'm saying we are living in technology and not with technology. And the question then is, can we help people imagine what they can't imagine? And this is what Evelyn, I think, rightly alluded to, that we have to somehow create an open space, and in that open space, imagine that anything is possible. And that's, I think, what public engagement means. And I think, to answer the question, those cities fare the best that create that open space as public space to imagine what people cannot imagine in themselves.
Okay, maybe Evelyn as well, you would have an answer on that one, on this correlation.
Well, just to first come back on what refer to what Robert says, that like you should trigger people's imagination, and indeed this can be done by also lowering the threshold. And like Frank says, you need to let them try new things. So you really, if you just say, hey, here is a big opportunity for just try this out. It's for free, and well, if it's nothing for you, okay, so no problem at all, but at least they tried, and really, and you incentivize people to try new things, and this is a really nice thing if you want to make the shift. And towards the correlation, actually today I read a really nice article about a citizen science project called Straat Vinken, which is, I live in Belgium, and it was a project in Belgium, and they they asked people in Flanders and in Brussels to measure the amount of motorized traffic in their streets. And then afterwards, people were also asked how good they feel where they live, so to have a notice of their well-being. And what they found out is there's a really big correlation also between the amount of motorized traffic passing in one street and the well-being of a person and the social cohesion in a street. So I think if people or municipalities would also have this kind of citizen science project where you really engage with people and really involve them, and then see how it is indeed, what is the relation. And if there's not, okay, then you can you don't need to shift your policy. But if the other thing, if you have these other results, then you can shift your policy towards what people really think, and can maybe indeed improve the well-being of the city. But it's only by measuring and by asking people that you will find out.
Okay, thank you. But Bernadette, do we have another question of relevance here?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one interesting one here on different generations. So how do you approach balancing intergenerational concerns, like the engagement of citizens today versus the considering needs of the citizens of the future?
Okay, and I suppose also maybe young citizens, senior citizens, all that range.
Yeah.
Maybe we can start with Frank. I suppose, you know, you're talking about the transformation from ownership to shared car models. How do maybe the more senior population respond to that? I suppose it could be very different to the younger generation.
Let me make it very practical and concrete. My hypothesis was that car sharing is a very good mobility services for urban seniors that are still very mobile. They have a driver's license. They are very active, but it was very hard to reach them in the first years. And campaigns like the one I showed you made for reach those target groups, which are huge and they are growing. And many elderly people move into city centers, and they are very reluctant when it comes to mobility as a service, as they don't know it really. They have no access. They have no need to try it out. But this is exactly what we are doing with those kind of campaigns. And what we managed is to address this target group very broadly, of older, that's not very friendly, senior citizens that maybe just were too reluctant to become a customer of car sharing, but they are keen to try it out. And most of those participants actually got rid of the car, but we had to take them at our hands and to show them how it works, what an electrical car means. It has no sound. You had to need a key to access the car. So we are talking about a technology as an enabler to bring demand and supply together. And this is something we need to do when we want to approach those senior target groups.
Okay, thank you. Burcu, in your, let's say, digital platform, I suppose you must have also these generational concerns. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, when we create a digital platform, we always have a question remark. It's going to be inclusive, but I mean, how can I say, with this pandemic process, we jumped to 2 years feature, and right now so many people is really feel comfortable to reach digital platform, use it. I mean, a little bit it's a great advantage for us, but still some people not able to reach internet. They are not able to use some digital platform. Because of this, we are also keeping all the time online the call center. They can reach us via call center, and then we can also represent them in this digital platform. We are using this digital platform not just for citizen reach us. Also, we show the other citizen who is calling us, who is even if writing a letter us, and yeah. But if we think the future still is probably our easy way to communicate with the citizen is going to be digital. Yeah.
Okay, and these questions are bringing us to another issue that I suppose is possibly difficult to answer for the people involved in citizen engagement. Is that, okay, we think it's a good idea. We think it would be important to involve citizens, but what about the processes? I mean, you're dealing with a group that is necessarily very heterogeneous. We've talked about the generations, but we talk about inclusiveness. I mean, there are so many things that one needs to take into account. So are the tools that allow for these processes to happen really robust enough, or do they not really pass the test? And that's why maybe people overlook them in the end. I'd like to start with you, Robert, as you've pushed a few provocative remarks to me. I can send you a provocative question. Do you think the methodologies are robust in this area?
Well, Jean-Paul, you have to try harder. That's not radical enough. Well, first and foremost, we assume that citizen engagement is communication, talking with the people, asking them and conversing them. But there are methods which actually create citizen engagement by praxis, by doing. And in one of the introductory presentations, we saw this pavement that has been altered by some people walking the grass. This can be an extremely powerful method. It's called shared space. Shared space was a method invented or created by Hans Mondeman in the Netherlands in the form of what's called Woonerf. Sorry for my pronunciation, which is an area, a public space that has no signs, no distribution of space for cars, for pedestrians, but it can be created by use. And then there is no problem of generations because, you know, a child walks differently and to the other places. And strangely enough, it slows. You don't need policemen to stop cars because people will slow down. People will be extremely responsible because they know that everybody moves around. So it's not obvious that we have to take what we are given. We don't have to have road signs. We don't have to have a distribution of places for cars, for pedestrians, for new entrants, but there can be an open space, and that's a form of public engagement as well. So there are extremely robust methods, not only research methods, but methods in which lay people are invited to create prototypes with the help of designers. And then extremely interesting things come up, things that nobody imagined before. For instance, there was a project by Fraunhofer in Germany, I'm sure all of you know, in which they invited lay people to think about practices of new forms of education. And people came up to take a long story short, came up with a kind of a capsule that they take into their mouth, it goes through their body, they spit it out, and this capsule will have all knowledge that any individual has accumulated through his or her life, and then washes it, and then gives it to someone else, and she eats it, and then she will have all the knowledge. So this is not a prototype. This is a way of thinking. Teaching can also involve other stuff than somebody standing out there on a stand and talking. So this is how public engagement should actually take place. Radical new knowledges brought into play. So there are very good methods, actually. Yes, Jean-Paul. Try harder.
Okay, I mean, I'm not quite sure I understand the method of the passing pill, especially in COVID times. You've got to be very careful of that one. But I hope that people will get some image out of it. Evelyn, Frank, I'd like also to hear from you on this question of the methods. Maybe we start with Evelyn.
Yeah, okay. Yes, indeed. I think it's really important to apply the right methodology to reach out to the right user group. I mean, if you want to know elderly 85 plus or 80 plus people, and you will try to use them with an online survey, well, maybe that's not fitted. So if you want to engage with the citizens, it's really important to use the right communication, the right language, and the right channels. And also, it's so important to cooperate with with other sectors and with other organizations, because it can be really time consuming to reach out to vulnerable groups. And so if you can then have the help of organizations that are already working with them, then it can help you a lot. Because even though I have a bit of experience now, I'm working 5 years already in user research, I still see in some EU-funded projects that it's still really difficult, even though I work with really experienced researchers to really reach the right people. People with a migrant background, for instance, sometimes hard to engage with. So it's also really important that you allocate enough human resources and enough time if you want to have a successful methodology. So right communication, right channels, intersectoral cooperation, and enough resources. I think these are my main tips and tricks for you to have a successful methodology.
Okay, Frank, how did you approach the methodological question of your initiative in Germany?
First of all, I completely agree with Evelyn and Robert, and this is why we cooperate with completely different organizations than we are. Before we started this project as a prototype project, we rolled it out in several other cities right now. We had to learn a lot, and our project partner in Berlin is a department within the Technical University of Berlin that just deals with citizen engagement. And so we have the experts on board, and I learned a lot. And like in different areas of life, it's all about communication. And we went out on the streets. We first started off the workshops inside. You saw the pictures. But to activate the majority of residents, we had to go out on the streets. And we had this parklet, and this was the area we started on the outside area to communicate with the residents. And we learned that the hardest step we had to take is to activate the silent majority that had no need to engage in this transformation process from their point of view. This was very hard. And the only thing was to get out on the street, to change public space as an option, as a temporarily built-up campaign, to foster their engagement. And we had panel discussions with residents on the topics of they are just taking away parking space. And at this point, we managed to got over the resistance of the car owners there. And this is where I stepped in. So I come from BMW Group, and I know the needs of car owners quite well, and I can address them properly and show them there's something in for them too. And yeah, and the main thing is on the same level communication, go out on the streets, don't be afraid. You have to engage with them on a face-to-face level with distance right now and with face mask, but this works too. Yeah.
But may I just ask you one thing in terms of leadership in the process? Would you say that BMW has to take leadership, or is it rather a leadership that needs to be taken by the local authority or another group?
I think this is a municipal task for sure, and we had to. We need a majority of municipal politicians to support this process. This was another step we had to take. But we kicked off the process with engaging with a local initiative of residents, and we were at first in the background, very much in the background. And of course, many were very reluctant when there was somebody from the BMW Group in Munich dealing with those issues, and we had to build up trust, and this is a very long-term transformation process.
Okay, thank you.
But there's no leadership. This is a collaborative approach.
No, I understand, but it's always good to know if there is some leader there. Burcu, you're obviously more the municipal side.
Okay, so from the municipal side, citizen participation is a process that puts those citizen wishes into the public decision. In the design of participation process, we ask three basic questions, but vital questions. Who will participate? Who will the participants communicate with each other? How will they decide together? And also, how will the result affect our policy and activities? And for example, I'm going to give another example. Playgrounds are designed under the leadership of children with the project of Istanbul Children Design Parks, initiated by the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, Department of Park and Garden Green Areas. The project implemented with the participatory municipality approach aims to develop active citizenship experience and sense of belonging in children. Workshops where participation-based models were applied were held with a total of 100 children between the age 16 and 14 years old. In the workshop, children explain their dreams about what kind of park they want to, with the facilitation of professionals such as city planners, landscape architects, industrial designers. They went to the park and they determined the problems and the potential on the spot, children express their needs and demands, develop solutions against the problems they determined. Proposals were also designed with the model workshop. At the end of the process, we realized that the children have started to use the parks they designed very often because they design their own space and according to their needs, and they adopt it. Therefore, we understood that engaging citizens in the early stage of process help us to determine their exact needs to find more accurate solution for their problems, even if they're at a young age. Or it is when we applied this participation method design, always public space using more frequently if we compared it before.
Okay, so it is possible, and you should do it at an early stage. Robert, you wanted to intervene. You can unmute yourself. I'll allow you that.
Thanks a million. You're very generous. I wanted to support Frank this time because I think leadership is, you see, leadership is an overestimated issue, political issue. I think you don't need leadership, and just the opposite, I think, because collaboration is key. And if there is a leader, then that leader will dominate the discussion, and their interest will dominate the discussion. Also, I think it's very important that there are equal parties and everybody is doing politics. So when we're talking about public engagement, it's very easy to say it's a political issue, it's the municipality's role. It's not the municipality's role in a city, because we are living not only in technology, but we're living in politics. We have different interests, we have different identities, we have different needs and different wants. And politics is somehow coping with all these differences. And it is not the politician's task, it is not the municipality's task to do coping, but it's all of us's task to create a democratic environment in which those needs and wants can be materialized as much as not hurting someone else's wants and someone else's needs.
Yeah, very clear. Thank you. Thank you for that statement. I would like to go back to Bernadette. Maybe we have a few questions being raised in the Slido that can fuel our discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jean-Paul. Yeah, it's actually very much aligned with what has already been said, because what has been said now actually by most of you is that it's not so much about citizen engagement as such, but more about identifying the needs of citizens. So if you look at it like that, so the question is, like, is it actually about citizen engagement, or do we actually want people to change their behavior? So isn't it more about providing the right environment, the necessary options for them to by themselves take the right decisions?
So is it about transformation, or is it about inclusiveness, or is it both? I see Robert is shaking his head, but I won't give him the floor just yet. I think I'll start with Eveline just to let the fire fume a bit.
Well, I believe it's both, actually. Indeed, before you can change people's mind, you need to know what they want and desire. So actually, I think it's more a conditio sine qua non kind of thing. I think also what Frank said is, but he as BMW, you really know your customers quite good. You know what car owners want, and so if you want them to try out new things, then you can break the resistance of those group if you are involved and said, hey, we are sure as a car constructor that this new or alternative can also entail benefits for you. Then you can indeed break the resistance a bit just by also knowing your target group. So yeah,
But if I may, I mean, there are also some very regulatory aspects behind this and targets, and there is a need to change behaviors, change products, change services. Many things need to happen that not necessarily are in the citizens' daily mind, but that might be in the minds of the businesses being affected, of the cities being affected. So there is a strong push here happening to change behavior.
Yeah. But well, it should be both a carrot and stick method. I mean, you should combine the top-down methods and bottom-up approach. I think then you will have the best results. Like, for example, now I can imagine if you would let all the citizens decide on how we should behave with the COVID-19, I think, well, there's a big chance that it wouldn't work out. So indeed, I think it's really important to know when you should start from a top-down approach and when you should have a bottom-up approach. Yeah.
Okay. Robert, you were shaking your head.
I have Parkinson, maybe. Well, first and foremost, I think that change is a very harsh word, because that would entail that there's something in their behavior that is not proper, and we need to change it for something better. I don't agree with that. I think that we have to align interests and wants and needs, because people are very complicated and complex. But more importantly, we seem to talk about mobility and the city not as a drama, but as getting from A to B. And mobility is not anymore from getting to from A to B. Mobility is a way of life. And I think that's the point. The point is not about changing behavior. The point is, what in a democratic process can we imagine our way of life being? What kind of way of life do we want to lead? And this is when I'm saying that technology should enable that way of life, but that this question comes first, and not changing behavior. It's imagining not mobility, imagining technology, imagining way of life. That's the key issue. And way of life obviously entails values, which we haven't been talking about. Public engagement is first and foremost about values and what we believe in and what we walk when we believe in those values.
Okay, you mentioned way of life, and I think I would like to go towards the last part of this debate. I mean, we have about 5 to 6 minutes left, and I would like to throw at you a question for the future. You talk about way of life, and I think that with all the technology and the data that we have at our disposal, this revolutionizes very likely the way we will be engaging with citizens, the way citizens also will be engaging with urban mobility systems. So the question I would have for you all is, has citizen engagement ever been made easier? Has it ever been easier actually to engage with citizens than now with all these tools available? Or has it ever been more necessary to do that because of all the challenges that we face? It's a big question. I would ask you to try and focus your answer. I would give you about 1.5 minutes each. And I would start with you, Frank.
Oh yeah, thank you for this.
The present.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. First of all, the potential of those digitally driven technologies is bringing demand and supply together in a completely new way. So as soon as you have transparency about the options you have in your city and when it comes to your day-to-day mobility patterns, and you get access to, you know that you don't need one mobility device that fits all your use cases, but you have access to thousands of on-demand vehicles. you experience that ownership is not important anymore. And I think this is an enabler to getting closer to this concept of shared space, of rethinking urban space as livable spaces. For me, it's a very important enabler that we never had before. And this is a chance we have to take and to use.
Okay, very understandable. The shared space that creates engagement naturally to some extent. Okay, Burcu, would you like to have a go at it?
I mean, when we compare the past, cities were smaller, more manageable structure in the past. Therefore, citizen participation was easier. As the population increased today, the cities become more complex and dynamic. In this complex structure, it has become more difficult for citizens to be seen by local governments, and also for local governments to reach citizens. It's not the technology used that make the smart city concept really smart, but people living it. I mean, yeah, and public participation is always necessary. Whether the city is big or small is not important at this point. Since small cities are more manageable, public participation easier compared to bigger cities, especially for Istanbul. Therefore, technological developments used for cities should be seen as means, not ends, in order to provide and support citizen engagement. In the face of challenges that create world-scale change, such as pandemic, climate change, the use of technology is increasing at the city scale and by citizens. Therefore, we have to develop agile, effective solution that will maximize the city participation, making the best use of these technological tools. For this reason, we actually turned a negative situation into the opportunity. Innovative development has been targeted with entrepreneurs who will shape our future with innovative ideas during and after the COVID outbreak. And this institution that will guide our entrepreneurs. The purpose of the COVID Express program is to match the advantage, initiative at large companies online and develop collaboration with new solution. Right now, we are using that kind of technological tools to reach the other cities. And I mean, we are creating a solution universal for universal problem altogether. We are sharing our experience. I can say
a final word. You have 10 seconds.
I mean, it is. It is ironic. It's make easier, but I mean, because of the cities is getting bigger. Yeah.
Okay. Easier with technology, but not easier in size.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Burcu. Evelyn. And unmute yourself, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I also believe that there in the potential of technology, that it can be an enabler, but it can also create the biggest challenge. I mean, the biggest challenge will be not to leave anyone behind and to keep in mind to focus and the will of closing the digital gap. And while we not really addressed all the needs of startups and SMEs during this, but because that now I want to have something for them. So I think it's important that they also want to change the mindset and to create the willingness to create digital tools that are specifically tailored to the requirements of these vulnerable groups. And because of doing it, because, well, sometimes it asks big investments and they sometimes lack the knowledge. So I think it's really important that, for example, EIT facilitates programs that can really support these SMEs and startups. And a really nice example is the High Reach program. If you go to the website, you can find also APIs for businesses, etc. But what they did is they set up a cross-country acceleration program to support and encourage them and to feed them with knowledge on vulnerable groups, so they didn't need to find out everything themselves. And they supported them during the whole process of making or reinventing and recreating their mobility services. And I think this is also a way to move forward in order not to forget anyone.
Okay, the inclusiveness message there at the end, but also working with SMEs and startups so that they better understand that as well and the importance of it. Thank you, Evelien. Robert, the hot potato, over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, if you look at the longitudinal scales of growth and well-being, for thousands of years, there was this very extremely slow growth of 1%, mainly because of population growth. And there was an exponential outbreak of well-being and economic growth around the 1920s and onwards. And sorry, Frank, it was not only because of the foundation of BMW, but mainly because that was the time of the spreading of democracy across the world over. And I think this is the key issue here. Public engagement or citizen engagement is a very complicated word. Let me suggest a simpler one. It's democracy. And democracy means involving and engaging citizens in creating our technologies and using our space. And this is the paradigm change. Paradigm change is turning to doing instead of communicating, understanding that we're living in and not with technology, and our practice is more democratic than it is expert-based. So instead of engagement, let me suggest simply more democracy.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. More democracy. So I will launch a last poll. Well, actually, Bernadette will do that, please. How convinced are you that citizen engagement is an essential part of developing urban mobility solutions? Having listened to our great experts, I would really like to thank Evelien, Burcu, Frank, Robert. You've been excellent panelists and you deserve a wonderful virtual round of applause. It's been a great pleasure to have you. And I would like to hand over now to Judith O'Mara from the EIT Urban Mobility team for some final remarks. Judith, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I need to switch my camera on, I think. Right, okay, hello everyone. Also a great thank you from me in the name of Innovation Hub Central to all of you. I know you're all very, very busy people in all of you as professionals in all of your sectors. So thanks for your time and efforts you've invested in this. Jean-Paul asked me to share a few statistics. So we've had nearly 200 registered participants in this talk. We had, of these, we have over 30 countries represented, of which there were 11 non-EU countries. And well, top countries, Spain, Germany, Turkey, Netherlands, Italy, Belgium, Denmark, all within our region of EIT Urban Mobility. And we had about 35% of participants from the private sector, 20 from the public, and 28 from academia, and the remaining 70 from NGO and other. So actually in the remaining 1 minute, I believe, I'm supposed to do a conclusion here. I can tell you I will not, right? I cannot conclude. I can give you a few personal takeaways from this, which were actually that citizens are not a homogeneous group, and we need different methods and methodologies to address them. That we're talking on the one hand about behavioral change, but it's a task everyone needs to do together. So Robert focusing on the democratic aspect and also the engagement of all stakeholders here. You discussed a number of things, also who would take the leadership, or if it's actually in the realm of the cities to take leadership in this. And here again, my takeaway is that this is really a combined effort by all citizens, also together with the other stakeholders, and not necessarily just in the realm of the policymakers. But let me come to EIT urban mobility in this. We at EIT Urban Mobility, we believe that citizen engagement is actually key, because this is actually to engage citizens and the local communities is, as you all said, is a necessity when we address innovation. And this is actually what we do at EIT Urban Mobility, the development and the deployment of new approaches and solutions with and for the citizens. And we need to take into account that we really need to engage all stakeholders. So this engagement, I've learned, will also increase social acceptance of, well, let's say, change. Robert contested the change as such. He said it's more of imagining the new livable urban space. So this also talking about tools and methods we need to use. We also believe, and here I take up Evelyn's thrown in about the integration of startups. We believe that it's very important to exchange and connect all stakeholders, as you pointed out, at various stages, including the corporates, of course, SMEs, and the startups in this process. And I think I can take from you that it is that we're right in the understanding that we should really reach out all the involved players before we implement the solutions. And also let me point out that at this point that the City Club of EIT Urban Mobility does give support to those cities that have living labs and engage such engagement with all stakeholders. So another thing which I would like to stress here is that Urban Mobility is already funding a project carried out by a large number of members of the city clubs. And this project aims at collecting best practices to develop a strategy that will provide guidance on how to implement citizen engagement and to create a platform which will be launched in 2021. Which will serve for learning and the collection of best practices from all stakeholders. So please, all of you, let's get and keep engaged in this exchange of knowledge. And please also watch out for our annual calls for proposals in the field of citizen engagement. And the next one should actually be published in February, March. So from my side, thank you for this starting off in this discussion, and I hope we keep bringing this all together again in our platform and continue this. And Bernadette also asked me to mention at this point to finish off that to make you aware of the EIT Urban Mobility Summit, which will take place 9th till 10th of December. Registration is open, and please check the web and follow us on the social media. So this from my side. Thank you very much.